That's the sound of the police.
That's the sound of the warning bells going off in my head whenever I hear an anime is packaged as the movie. There are only a few things that are possible when it comes to an anime movie. Number one, it's going to be impenetrable for new viewers. Number two, it's going to be completely out of canon, and maybe not even follow the main characters of the original series. Or three, it's going to be a hasty conclusion because the original show ran out of budget. Trust me, it's going to be a bad time. eX-Driver is actually not a series about people who no longer have driver's licenses, but rather a series about self-driving cars that occasionally go nuts, and so it's up to these elite children to go and stop them. Is it too late to pick a different animated review? I gotta go through with this one. Do I have to take another rock to the head to get through it? Alright, but it's not in the face, it's a moneymaker. Yes, even though we're all quite excited about Google's self-driving cars, this show seems to think that it's going to lead to trouble because AI inherently dislikes us. Or something. I'm not exactly clear on why they go screwy, but why get bent out of shape about the reasons when there are cars going vroom vroom to distract us? This whole eX-Driver program seems like a solution to a problem that a few dozen programmers could probably fix in a week or so. And you'd think that they'd have bug tested it a little better before rolling them out to every motorist on the planet. Yes, no one knows how to drive anymore in the future, which never seems to stop anyone in my hometown, but what do I know? So instead of trying to roll out a patch or anything, they just kind of let the eX-Drivers take care of the cars that go rogue. Part of me says not to look at the huge gaping flaws in this premise, but this is not some great show with an amazing aesthetic that they're trying not to compromise. This is a show about 3,000-pound bullets that go haywire. If the Edsel couldn't swing it, neither can you guys. eX-Driver as a series spawned originally as a 6-episode OVA and then got itself a movie and a janky set of specials that went with said movie. It focuses on Soichi Sugano, some kind of driving wunderkind, and his partners Lisa and Lorna, who are both noticeably shown up by someone whose feet can't reach the fucking pedals. One is sweet, one is sour, and to be honest, I just called them Feathers and Girl while I was watching it. Yes, in much the same way that people watch Fast and the Furious movies for the car stuff and not the characters, this series is a little lax on character development, and the movie does little to buck this trend. Going into it cold, I figured that I'd be a little confused at first, but what I realized very quickly is that I can tell everything I need to know by looking at the character design. There's the spunky one, there's the genteel one, and then there's the tsundere. There's something to be said for making characters easy to read, but you're supposed to add some depth to them at some point, too. I'm sure I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but try harder. The movie itself primarily focuses on their little adventure in America, where all the best eX-Drivers in the world come to compete in the world's least interesting sport, stock car racing. So if you're looking for a way to get Uncle Jeb into anime, this is probably a good place to start. It's all wrapped up in the mafia, because of course it is, because America, and there's some really unfortunate accidental racism interspersed in there, because of course there is. Oh, but don't worry, it's Italian Americans they're painting unfairly. I've got some Italian Americans in my family, and I think Uncle Vinny and his buddies Big Sal, Bruno 2 Times, and Tony the Finger would be really hurt by these implications. Oh, but there's also Chinese stereotypes too. Oh, hello! eX-Driver is not really endearing itself to me from a story perspective. So let's focus on the animation instead. It's bright, colorful, and kind of stings my eyes. This was made in the early days of full digital animation, which occurred around the turn of the century and probably to our detriment. I'm a sucker for cell animation anyway, but those transition years were rough. It's actually too bright and colorful, which seems an odd complaint to have, but it really could have done well to have a less eye-burning pop to the color. A slightly muted color scheme is better than a completely unfiltered one any day of the week. And seriously, one of the characters is so pale she's actually bioluminescent. The plot really just kind of continues without the main character's input in it. It's like the story was written and then they just picked spots to put the characters in so we could pretend it was relevant to them. What really struck me is just how amazingly bland and uninteresting the main drivers were, and how little the movie does to remedy that. The boy is boy, and that's it. The women are quiet girl and girl who wants attention from boys. But quiet girl gets more attention because sexism, and you know what? I can't even bring myself to get mad. It's not worth the effort. I think the most noteworthy thing about this show is just what a non-entity it is. If Monster Musume was hot, wet street trash and Coyote Ragtime was good but barely registered, eX-Driver the movie is just sort of nothing. It exists, but yet does not. Honestly, I wish I spoke Latin well enough to come up with a fancy name for it, but here's what it boils down to. It is a series, or in this case a movie, that exists just to fill space. It is a show with neither an interesting or well-executed premise, nor characters that are engaging or interesting. Here's the thing about eX-Driver. It's boring. The characters aren't interesting or funny, they just stand there and say words. The action bits aren't interesting or cool, they just kind of happen. The world isn't even interesting enough to make fantasies about. It's a movie with nothing to it. It's not popcorn or fluff, it's cinema nihilo. It is a nothing film. That is pretty much the worst thing I can say about any movie or anime. Cinema nihilo is what you get when a show is so utterly bland and uninteresting that I can't even get mad at it. Toradora doesn't even get that distinction, but a lot of stuff like Big Wars or the stuff Manga Entertainment used to dump out on VHS will fit the bill pretty handily. Essentially, things that are not funny because of their incompetence, nor because of their actual talent put into it, get this classification. A movie that just wastes the time you put into it without sparking any emotional reaction other than a profound sense of loss is cinema nihilo.
Huh? It stalled!
What's wrong with it?
So really the only thing that's worth saying about it is that you probably all have a copy of this shit stack if you bought the blind box from Crunchyroll. I think this and Appleseed were the only two movies that definitively made it into every one of those boxes. And you know what? There is no godly way to get rid of them otherwise. It's so awful that it's a black hole of fun that hoovers up everything around it and drains the color out of it, leaving boredom and lethargy in its wake. So the only thing I can safely say about it is that I only paid $1 for this, and I definitely got overcharged.
And now the moment you've all been waiting for. The only thing worth doing to eX-Driver? Destruction.
Alright, well, according to the Twitter poll that I ran for a couple hours, I gave the options of burning it, blunt trauma, straight out breaking it, or Kobe. And everybody seemed to be voting for Kobe, so here goes. You asked for this. Kobe! It wasn't nearly as satisfying as I had hoped. Alright, well.
X gon' give it to you. Fuck, wait for you to get it on your